Hi everyone, today I'm your host Sean from Evolution Recruitment, and today we have two thought leaders from the blockchain industry to share with us a melting pot of ideas to you guys. An introduction please, probably Cesare.
Hi everyone, I'm Cesare. So I've been in blockchain since pretty much the very beginning. I did my first trades on Mt. Gox, for those who remember. And now I am the CTO at Mintable, so we do NFTs.
Wonderful. My name is Lukasz Orlowski, or Lukasz Orlowski as Americans tend to call me. I've been a blockchain user since 2017. I've been in the space professionally for a little bit over 2 years. Just making magic happen. Currently, I work with Firechain, where we are combining sustainability with blockchain and building a substrate-based solo chain out there.
Amazing. Right. So today for our podcast, we'll be talking about Web3 securities, and I'm delightful to have two CTOs that can share their technical insights with us today to this topic. Right. So first off, we just want to talk about what is Web3 securities and how does that differ from the traditional web security, so to speak. Lukasz.
Sure. Well, you kind of start off with a very broad question, which is what is Web3, right? And there's a number of angles you could try to approach it from. To me, it's basically shifting the ownership model, whereby in Web 2, you have a service provider, an organization of whatever sort that, grants a service, owning your data and everything, infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. Whilst in Web 3, and your assets most importantly, right? Whilst in Web 3, you shift the ownership to the user. And as you can imagine, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So basically, you gotta make sure that, you store your seed phrase in a secure manner, right? Now, this is essentially where the security revolves about, right? So it is not only at the infrastructure level, but it also is at the level of you securely storing your keys, etc., right? It's basically the sort of you're practicing good security hygiene, right? That's a very broad topic.
Right. And sorry, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree, especially on the fact of ownership and being in control is not that easy. Most people don't get it. I was talking to a friend actually a couple of days ago, and his dad happened to invest $20,000 in one of the meme coins, which became $500,000, and he lost his key.
Oh, Lord.
And his reaction was, I'm going to sue them. But that doesn't work. Our mind is set in such a way that there is always someone who can help. In this case, there is no one who can help. You are in charge. If you lose control, you lose control. And I would add a second topic. There is also in Web3 security, Web3 is young, it's a young technology, and there are plenty of ways to exploit it. So while the infrastructure we could assume is secure, otherwise it would have been exploited by now, but there are plenty of opportunities for bad actors to circumvent everything.
So on that note, right, exploiting, what are probably the main security risks that are being associated within the Web3 space?
But I think the main security risk is always people, no matter what.
And
I just give you an example. It happened a while ago, but some people had their wallets drained of USDT or their Ethereum wallet emptied from some ERC-20 tokens, which usually represent currency. And that came from a utility function in the smart contract, in the ERC-20 smart contract, which would allow marketplaces and exchanges to operate on your behalf. But the fact of not understanding what are the implications of signing a message that you don't understand led to all this. And even people who were experts got scammed in this way. So basically everything that you do on the blockchain carries risk, and you need to understand before you do.
Right. Totally agree. Given that, blockchain is such a nascent technology, people will still try to exploit. In any other industry, this will still happen, but just that because this is still very nascent. there will be more of these bad actors trying to exploit, right? So then how can we actually use blockchain technology to enhance the Web3 security in this aspect then? What are your thoughts?
How we can use blockchain to enhance security? Trying to kind of like think about the angle I get to approach that from. See, the whole thing is that, as Cesare said, there's nobody to blame. Okay, so you need to know what you're doing. And this is a very loaded statement. You need to know what you're doing. Do you use Ethereum itself?
Not on the chain, but probably through the web.
Fair enough. I mean, Cesare, I'm not going to ask the question because and as I said, signing transactions, like allowing a service to operate within a certain amount. I mean, do you really read through the message and whatnot and then analyze that? At some point, it becomes a real pain in the neck to do that, right? So essentially what I do, I have a system, which I'm not going to discuss here because, I'm practicing security about security to certain extent. But that boils down to using multiple different cold wallets from different vendors, right? And essentially, whenever the ones that I used to operate, right, every so often, I revisit the smart contract that I've authorized on there, and I routinely disable that, right? And just to check, whenever first I'm using, like say exchanges like 1inch or Uniswap, right? Like when it comes to that, and like I need to again authorize something, I'm okay to do that again, just to see whether anything has changed and whatnot, right? But the problem is here that ease of use and security never go hand in hand. Those are orthogonal things, right? And for that exact reason, for instance, I tried to explain to my wife, it's like, look, it's not pleasant to use, but that's what you got to do. But then she says, well, it's troublesome. I'm like, well, I know. Hence, it's secure. So, she tasks me to handle all that stuff, right? But just to get to your question, right? You need to educate yourself. It boils down to at least some rudimentary understanding of what you're doing and what are the risks involved, and building a system. And I'm not trying to say that you will want to, create something on your own. See, the best thing about internet security is that the less creative you get about it, the better. There are best practices, and they're called best because they're the best. And you should follow them to the dot, and that's essentially what it boils down to, like wrap your head around the best practices. And if you choose not to follow certain of them, at least do understand the risks you're taking, because there's got to be nobody else to blame but you.
It's like a give and take, right?
Pretty much.
What about you?
This makes me think of one of my favorite quotes: "If it is convenient, it's not secure."
Thank God.
Yeah, that's the main point. And actually, I think in the end, it's not only Web3, because if you think about that, I cringe every time somebody tries to force me to give them my phone number to recover my account. That's the point. I do not want to recover my account. I don't want to be able to recover my account. And that's one of my favorite Web2 services that is getting quite big now, but it's Proton, former Proton Mail, now it's called Proton. I could sign up without giving them my name, my phone number, and a secondary email. So I'm in charge. I'm responsible. If I lose my password, I am done. But I know that, and I will not lose my password.
Right. And then what would be the type of common attacks on the Web3 space? I know you guys have talked about some of them being like, not fully having the grasp on the smart contract, right? That's probably the most common one, right? Yeah. But other than that,
there are plenty of. So if we think about Ethereum, it's what I know best. But if you think about the evolution of the EVM and the languages, mainly Solidity, there have been plenty of vulnerabilities patched over time, and it's possible with simple mistakes to allow a bad actor to take ownership of a smart contract. If you are not careful, I think that has been patched recently, but it was just possible by crafting function calls in a certain way to become the owner of the contract without any action from the actual owner. There are risks in so if a smart contract is forever, is immutable. There are techniques to make that to make it possible to issue updates, but that again comes with a lot more complexity and a lot more. This attack surface becomes much larger. So you always need to be when you think development in the blockchain, you need to think to make it as small as possible, as controlled as possible, to put as many eyes as you can on your code, so that when you deploy it, you are sure that that it's fairly safe. Then the only real way to tell is time.
Right. I like how you said fairly safe. I mean, essentially in the end we're all humans, and that's the weakness of technology in the end of the day. To add to what Cesare was saying, when we talk about smart contracts on, I don't want to say only Ethereum, but like on EVM chains, right? With Solidity, the reentrancy is the biggest issue. Your code could be good, but you don't know what else you're interacting with, and then what's going to happen. And there's just a ton of those little gotchas that you go like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. Now the caveat is, it's just sprinkled with each other. It's immutability, right? So now we get to the point. All right, so do I want to enable smart contracts, quote unquote, updatability by, for instance, applying the proxy pattern and whatnot, right? Or do I want to practice what Andre Cronje preaches? Basically, you do it once and you do it right. And again, there are merits to both of those approaches, right? However, we constantly learn as humans. I mean, I sure as hell learn every day, right? And the thing with immutability is like, you do something to the best of your knowledge at a certain point, and then you launch it, go like, oh shit, there's also this. So what do you do of it, right? So, it's this kind of like incessant struggle that, that we're going to have. But, and then just, to get back to the original question, like, I spent a fair bit of time, like in the NFT space, have worked with Engine. And one of the things that I've seen over there, and that is specifically pertaining to Web3, not blockchain, is front running when it comes to first NFT marketplaces. People have made themselves filthy rich by just running front running, scripts. And that's not cool.
I mean, that doesn't apply to just NFT, right?
I don't want to only say it applies to NFTs, because if you think about it this way, an NFT is just nothing else than a smart contract, right? So, if it applies to smart contract, it can apply to anything else, right? I mean, that can be tokens, right? That can be whatever, right?
And then we talk about best practices that we can try to protect ourselves, right? As in, we are the best security of anything, right? But what about talking about decentralized apps, DApps? Is there another set of rules or, that we should play by?
I mean, when you see what happened with centralized actors recently, you can't really say that one is better than the other. I was doing algo trading on FTX. At the moment when it happened, I didn't have almost anything, so I didn't likely, of course, do like I felt it coming. I moved to cold storage in time, but it's a big risk. And now we are at the stage. So if you played with the very first decentralized exchanges that appeared on Ethereum, it was a very complex exercise, and also they were far from optimized, because the entire order book, if you're familiar with trading, the entire order book, so all the buy and sell offers were on chain. With the gas cost that we have today.
I was just about to say, yes, like every single transaction.
Yes, exactly. So today, with the Uniswap and the likes, it's possible. I haven't tried, but it's possible to do algorithmic trading on the centralized exchanges. I think again, I would put it back on the time factor. You need to give time to a new entrant on the market to show that they are secure before you invest too much into them.
And what about yourself, Lucas? Do you completely agree? Anything?
I do actually agree with what Cesare said. I mean, in the end of the day, see, what you touched on, Cesare, is the notion of trust. In the end of the day,
Yes.
the new player has to accrue some reliability, some street cred, right? And that basically boils down to whom you choose to trust. And that sort of matter of trust in the Web3 space, it's a completely separate can of worms that I could just go on talking for hours and hours, right? But yeah, it just boils down to, whether you're willing to trust somebody or not. And inherently, that is something that is very opposed to why I chose this blockchain to begin with, right? You don't want to trust things. You want things to be verifiable, right? But then, as you're introducing, I mean, and again, for instance, I moved most of my assets to cold wallets. Whenever I need to swap them out, I use decentralized exchanges, right? I hold certain number of different kinds of tokens on a couple of centralized exchanges just in order to be able to, flip them if an opportunity materializes, right? But see, inherently, whether dApps are better than, centralized exchange, we're talking about dApps first, we say, if a decentralized exchange is better than a centralized exchange. It depends. See, as Cesare said, right, if you mess something up on a decentralized exchange, there's nobody to blame but yourself. Honestly, oftentimes you don't need to blame yourself because, sometimes it might not be your fault, but there's nothing you can do. On the other side of the coin, there is centralized exchanges, and if something happens, then you can be like, hey guys, I was using your service and that's what happened. What gives, right? And they may or may not help you, but we've seen what's going on. So the aforementioned company with Cesare, that went down. And then, you gotta have all the naysayers saying, oh yeah, because crypto is, all this and that. I'm like, yeah, and I look at the American banking system. Okay, what do you make of that, right? And it's there's I honestly don't know what to tell you. I just believe that you want to trust less and you want to be able to verify things. And in the end of the day, you want to trust yourself. Hence, you will want to use decentralized things, right? But you need, again, this boils down to what I said before, but you got to understand the risk you're taking.
I would add one thing on that. When you think about decentralization and dApps, most of the time, most of the people would interact with dApps through a web service or through an app on their phone. There is actually a very interesting blog post from Marilyn Martin-Spike, the CEO of Signal. And it's about more than 1 year ago, as roughly a year, but it's still very, very relevant today. Most decentralized technology today relies on a very limited number of actors, I mentioned a couple of names, but Alchemy, Infura, and for everything that is NFT related, the people would call OpenSea, ABI. So in the end, it's not as decentralized as people might want to think.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, but then you also have multi-factor authentications as well, right? Like your SNS OTP or authenticator that is mostly used in Web 2, right? And going into Web 3, do you guys think that there may be a form of this kind of multi-factor authenticator just for Web 3 itself?
Absolutely, yes. One thing here. YubiKey, right?
Right.
Simple as that. And I bet you got one in your keychain as well.
I have two here that I was actually bringing at I'm going to bring at the bank later, and another one on my keyring.
So it's essentially what we're trying to say is we practice what we preach, But see, the whole thing is it just boils down to cryptographic schemes, and those devices that's no magic, right? I mean, in the end of the day, you can store your cryptographic keys on there, and that's it. And if assuming that it's FIPS 140 layer 2 compliant, okay, then, it's tamper evident. Then, if it's layer 3 compliant, level 3 compliant, okay, it's basically, you can't tamper with it because you got to destroy the material on there, right? So the whole thing is that, well, yeah, you got your cryptographic key material on there because that's all you need from the standpoint of blockchain. Because in the end of the day, at first the account-based blockchains, they rely, not account, UTXOs too, they rely on the principles of asymmetric encryption, right? So yes, but now the question is is that two-factor authentication? Well, there's just one factor, your private key, right? It is on a dedicated device, but so, if you want to think about it, well, I got a separate device and then I got my computer and my phone, you fill in blank, right? You could argue that those are two factors, right? But in the Web3 sort of narrative, right? You got your password, you got your, account name, whatever, you got your password, a very special phrase that is known only to you and everybody from NSA and whatnot, right? And then you got a second, factor, like a YubiKey, like authenticator app, you name it, right? And that's great, right? And this proves to work. Probabilistically speaking, that provides far more security, right? So there are efforts of bringing that to blockchain, right? Like we've all heard about the big hoo-ha about ERC-4337, right? Where basically abstracts away the account. So that kind of cloaks the, you get smart contract addresses and you get user addresses, right? And ERC 4337 kind of just clumps them up together and just provides a layer of abstraction, right? The great thing about that is that there are actually leeways for you to recover your lost keys at that point, right? But then again, it's becoming more convenient, hence secure, right?
Well, I thought so, yes. I would rewind a bit on the two-factor authentication. I think it's important here to make a distinction between authentication and encryption. So usually what we call two-factor authentication is just to authenticate yourself, to prove that you are you. But in the end, what your provider who's checking that your 2FA, which is linked to your phone or to some other device, but in reality is just another static seed that is used to generate the factors that change over time are the same. So in the Web3 world, you have things like multi-signature wallets that could eventually, it allows you to have multiple wallets and multiple factors. You could say you could put them on different, as Lukasz mentioned, you can have them on different brands of cold storage wallets or on different devices. So that would help. But in mirror, yes, that is great. And basically, what Ledger announced a couple of days ago that they will basically split your key. Let's get to that later, but in 3 parts and allows you to have 2. Basically, what Shamir does is it generalizes that, but you are in control. I can decide to have 10 different shards, and I need 7 of them or 8, whatever. I'm in control. Basically, it's not really. I don't need to trust Ledger to know best. But besides that, I wanted then to touch base on the 4337, which is what I really liked about 4337 is that it doesn't touch the consensus layer of Ethereum.
And that's what made it so successful. There was a proposal before, but that required a change of consensus.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, you don't touch the underlying security of the platform, but it's all done at the MEV, at the mempool level. So it's just a way you package transactions that reduces a lot the attack surface. And I really hope it is successful, because it does indeed create new opportunities for attacks, for bad actors to get around things. But again, I think it's a good thing.
I agree. Just to add on to that, right? Look, you can't boil the ocean, as one of my mentors, says. And the whole thing is that the biggest struggle that Web3 adoption is observing is that it's completely different from what people are used to. And, like degens like myself or Cesare, are going to go into that because let's play around with that, see what happens. Not a lot of people want to do that. I mean, you have a lot of people who are late adopters and they're very comfortable with Web2 and that's all they want to do. And if we want to really see Web3 adoption, we got to bridge that gap over there, right? When we do that, though, to kind of circle back to one thing that I was talking about before is that, we're talking about the ownership model here. That's that sort of paradigm shift. So if you want to enable Web2 native flows for the users, what is going to happen is, the custody of the keys is handed over to a party who we need to trust, right? And again, that kind of goes against the whole concept. But at the same time, what I firmly believe in is the enabling people to take their first steps in that, wrap their heads around that, and then be like, all right, now I want to claim my keys. And from that point on, I want to assume responsibility for it, right? You just can't really tell people, okay, if you lose that, that's gone. And they go, yeah, that's cool. And then your friend goes, yeah, but what of it now? It's well, it's what on the bridge now.
Right. And on that note that Cesare has touched on, the can of worms that has been the talk of the town on Reddit, on Twitter, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, I am actually trying to design a doorstop with the various ledgers that I have, because I have, I really like the idea of a secure element in the ledger, but the big part of the announcement that Ledger made with that Ledger Recover service is not that, okay, they might roll back on the announcement, but the damage is done. Now, I know that with a firmware update on a closed source firmware, they can get my private key. So that's enough. Okay, they tell me if you listen at the announcement, if you read the details, first they are very vague on very important points. Yeah. They tell you, okay, the encryption happens inside your wallet, but what kind of encryption? Where are the keys? Then it's sent to 3 different actors, Ledger and 2 others, the actual provider, which is Coincover, I think, yes. Now the thing is, who is sending them? What is the pathway? Your ledger is not able to communicate with any internet protocol. So probably the app does something that any bad actor could replicate. So at that point, the fact that you can restore your wallet on a different device means that the encryption key is not proprietary to your device.
Exactly.
So basically, I am exporting something which might be very well encrypted, but it can be decrypted elsewhere. So my cold wallet suddenly became a hot wallet.
Yeah. I mean, what my take on it is, I'm disappointed, very disappointed. I was very fond of my ledger, and I didn't get myself the Nano X with Bluetooth because that's another attack vector. I didn't get myself the Ledger Stacks, even though I was very tempted to get it because it looks great. Holy shit, I just used the brick and mortar little gizmo that's kind of it's great. And now they tell me, yeah, but we got your back. It's for your own protection. Yeah, I'm perfectly capable of protecting myself. Thank you. But see, look. The motto of Ledger is trust yourself. I think they all need to rebrand now, because, as Cesare said, somebody else can hypothetically, recover your key and elsewhere. And it's you no longer trust yourself, you got to trust those guys. And this entire spiel that they sold is basically, trust us, we know what you're doing. I'm yeah, I heard it multiple times, I don't know about that. So, and don't get me wrong, I went through the entire sort of, I'm working on the bits and pieces here, but what they explained, obviously, as Cesare said, leaving out massive things where you go well, that can't be done very right or very, very wrong. Seems that, the architecture and the whole thing is done well. So that's cool. But the problem is that now you got to trust. I don't want to.
Who tells you that tomorrow Ledger will not buy CoinCover and then there will be the one actor? Because you need two of the three to recover your keys. So one company by just one M&A event could get in control. And it's closed source. So I will not mention the brand because now it's becoming a hot topic. But the first hardware wallet that I used, actually I went very much into it. They didn't have a secure element like Ledger. So they went to great length to write the code in such a way that in a firmware update, your private key would be securely wiped before the new firmware was stored on the device, so nobody could actually extract it, even if they froze the thing and took out the memory and tried to read it very fast while the update was happening. And I could check the code, and it was actually I knew what was going on my wallet. With Ledger, I can't. I had to trust them, and now they broke the trust.
Yeah,
that is something that cannot be repaired.
And on top of all that, I mean, I can say that, Cesare can say that because, we're both EU citizens. And look, European Union is obviously, trying to, kind of sort out the framework, and we all heard about MiCA and whatnot, right? But see, I don't know if you got a chance to take a look at the, the stable coin pegged to euro. And I counted at least 2 pulls in the smart contracts. Not unlike that. Now, Ledger is an EU-based company, right? So that worries me, because in the end of the day, the jurisdiction can say, well, that's all cool, but we need to have a glance into what you guys got over there, and their hands are tied, and that's it, and it's all done for your protection, mind you, but I'm not buying into that.
There is another quote that I love. It's from Malcolm Turnbull, the former PM of Australia. At some point, there were the usual talks about breaking end-to-end encryption, and so the PM was proposing to break all secure means of communications, and he said something like, laws of mathematics are very commendable, but in Australia only the laws of Australia are applicable. But if you there is nothing that can be used only by the good guys. If you make something available, the bad guys will find a way to use it.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
And Ledger is, I think everybody will see it's like a shield, right? But now that they have come out with Ledger Recover, it's like they have also provided swords. Right? It's like a sword fight, but they're providing both equipments to everyone, right? And that's a conflicting interest that everybody will have, and a lot of disappointment in the community as well, right? And I guess it's very, very honored to have both CTOs on board on this podcast who resonate so well with each other. I don't think I forgot any other guests who has this kind of level of...
We have known each other for a while.
We've known each other for a while, and we're on the same page. I mean, come on, we're doing Web3, okay? It's we're doing the same things. Obviously, we're on the same page, right?
Is there anything else that you would like to share with the community before we close off the podcast?
I don't know, cause I could, but I don't want to be too cynical, but just read before you do anything, and trust no one, okay? Because that's ultimately why you want to use Web3. If there's a trust factor involved in that, you should probably reassess. But in the end of the day, I know it's a very hot topic. Oftentimes it becomes a buzzword, but what I would really want to implore everyone who's interested in that, taking their first steps as a user, perhaps, working in the space, do educate yourself properly and verify everything, because that is at the core of the blockchain technology to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to close the podcast.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today, Lukasz, Cesare. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and see you on the next. Bye.